Well, welcome everyone. We are thrilled to have you join us for this live Tech Canada Deeper Insights webinar. My name is Colton Esser, and I am the Strategy and Research Supervisor here at Tech Canada. And today I have the absolute pleasure of introducing our speaker, Isabelle Perreault. Isabelle is the founder and CEO of Differly Inc. and a proud Tech Canada member. With the provocative statement, "Rational is overrated," Isabelle challenges business leaders to embrace disruptive thinking and unlock their potential for innovation. In today's webinar, Isabelle will delve into how innovative organizations not only improve current practices, but also embrace unconventional growth paths through systematic experimentation. This session promises to be an immersive Crashup experience, which is a unique blend of a crash course and a mashup that embodies the very innovation principles it teaches. We are excited to learn from Isabelle's extensive experience and gain insights that can transform our approach to innovation. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Isabelle Perreault. One quick note, if you do have any questions, please feel free to post them in the chat. We will be saving some time at the end for Isabelle to address any questions you might have. Isabelle, the floor is yours.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Et bonjour for my Francophone colleagues out there. I just wanted to thank you for joining because as a fellow CEO, if there's other CEOs in the room or, leaders, I know that all we have is our time. So I'm really honored that you're taking this hour with me, and I'll share my screen so we can begin. There we go. Colton, is that everybody can see my screen? Perhaps just give me an okay if you see that.
Looks great.
Perfect. Okay, so what I want to do today is really leave you with a nugget of inspiration. So might be a tall task if you've been in business for a long time, but that is really my goal today. I've been on many of these myself, and I'm probably not going to blow your mind in every area, but I'm hoping that I'll leave you with a couple of nuggets that you'll make you think after the session, and then hopefully a couple of really pragmatic tools that you can apply in your business. So, and I will explain the rational is overrated a little bit later, but I'm gonna leave that to the end. I'm going to jump right in and then introduce myself a little bit more. But first, I just want to talk about what the biggest risk to your organization is. So just think about it a little bit. I'm sure, we've got if there are other tech members, and welcome to the non-tech members too. I think it's really cool that it's open to everyone. We talk a lot about this in the tech meetings, and there's a lot of risks, a lot of opportunities. But I dare say there's one that maybe you haven't thought of. So if you think about it for a minute, what's the biggest risk? And I say it's success. And don't jump off right away. I say success. Why? Because you've codified success. If you're in business and you're a successful business, it's because you've codified success. You look at what has worked in the past for your business, you make improvements, and you do it again. And why do we do that? Because it's predictable. And who doesn't want predictable? I know I do. As a business owner, I definitely want to have predictable success, and I want to be able to replicate it. It's what we all want. But what happens with that, it can also lead to complacency. And I see this a lot in my last 20 years in business, and in particular the last 10 focused on innovation. We all have these examples. We all know, that Kodak didn't embrace digital photography despite having the technology. We know that Blockbuster ignored the shifts to online streaming which Netflix capitalized on. We've heard their stories before. And what I want to do, I'm going to give you some more examples. I also want to debunk what innovation is. There's just a lot of buzzwords around it. So that is also one of my goals. My goal and the purpose of the company I built Differly is to improve small and medium-sized businesses in particular, improve your ability to innovate and what you can do as a leader to create those conditions. That is truly my purpose, is to really help organizations just continually innovate and continually do it in a repeatable format. So I just want to tell you a little bit more about where this came from for me. So 15 years ago, I had the privilege of leading marketing and all things digital at an NHL club, still very near and dear to my heart. But it was in a time of a lot of disruption. So think about 15 years ago, how far we've come, right? The launch of SaaS, the launch of CRM tools, the launch of social media. And there was really no guidebook. There was no playbook for this type of transformation. So I really was out of my depth, but also really challenged and kind of inspired. So I just decided to, after like 9 years, while I was still there, I really wanted to codify kind of those big drivers of change that I was seeing. And of course, that everybody was also seeing around me. So across customer experience, across change and culture, technology and data, operating model, the structure of organizations and how we work together. So think about increased agility, that kind of thing, because I didn't see it anywhere. And what that led to a couple of things, but it led to one of the first digital maturity assessments for the pro sports sector, which was adopted by a lot of different leaders across all leagues. So that was encouraging. And then I moved to associations, and eventually I moved to the launch of Differently because I thought it was where I could really make the most impact. And so our focus is very much on the small and medium-sized enterprise because I do feel it's a huge unmet need. A lot of those larger organizations, either they have a lot of resources, or they can hire a chief, innovation officer, or they acquire, or they have innovation hubs. But I feel like the small and medium-sized enterprises are really the ones that need to understand how to do this and in a really pragmatic way. So that's what we are going to talk about for the next hour. So as we say, we all strive for that repeatable success, but I also think we need to strive for that repeatable innovation. So that is my goal for today's session. And for the next hour, we are going to delve into these 5 areas. And like Colton was saying, I'm probably introducing a lot of concepts here, but Crashups, where did that come from? Well, I was thinking on my way back to a conference 5 years ago where it was really deep in one area. And I started, I've been studying innovation for the last 10 years easily. And one of the notions of innovation, and we'll see that play, is that it's a diverse, typically it's a diversity of thought, diversity of different competencies, but also concepts that bring together breakthroughs. So as I was coming back from that conference, sitting on the train, I was thinking, it would have been really great to see that topic from a lot of different angles. So as Colton said in the intro, the idea of that crash course mashup came together as Crashups. And we had a really successful event in Ottawa before the pandemic, but it also became in my mind a thematic for how to present things. So I'm saying that to you now because we're going to go fast around a lot of different concepts, but my goal is that toward the end, you're able to connect the dots. And even if not all during this call, and I know that the tech webinars are seen even after, the goal is that you're able to kind of connect those dots between a lot of different disciplines, and it just keeps things fast and hopefully a little bit fun. So let's get going. And I want to start with what exactly is innovation, because, and some of you might go, yeah, we know. And so if you already know this, I'll repeat it again. But I think when I meet a lot of people, they think, especially I'm in Ottawa, it's a tech-centric town, innovation equals technology. And that is just not the case. Technology in and of itself is not innovative. We always say it differently that, technology doesn't disrupt, people do. You need to be able to do something with the technology in order for it to be disruptive. It's also not just creativity. Creativity is definitely tied and it's critical to innovation, but it's a precursor to it. It's not the same thing. So what is innovation? Well, quite simply, it's just new value. So if you think about what you're doing in your business today, we'll delve into that a lot later, that, you're optimizing the current business. What is innovation? It's simply doing something differently that creates new value. Doing something differently that creates new value. So the innovation is really a process, and we'll see it's a multidisciplinary process, and the outcome is creating new value for the organization. And I'll say as well, if you have questions, please put it in the chat as you go along. I won't necessarily take them right away because like I said, I want to be able to connect the dots. But if you have questions, because we're going to be bouncing around, it'd be great. Just pop it in the chat so you don't forget about it. So let's just look at some fundamentals of the three types of innovation. So that's the other, when we talk, another reason why innovation is such a loaded topic is because we can approach it from a lot of different angles. So I've easily studied, and I'm sure somebody's going to say, oh, maybe didn't do this one, right? I think I've studied like most all of the main models of innovation that are possibly out there. And then I also studied from corporate innovation, which is a lot of what we're going to talk about today, market innovation, and also all the different types of ways to approach innovation. So all the drivers of innovation, like I said, creativity, et cetera. But I think just to start with the baseline, so we're all kind of on the same page in terms of the main types of innovation. And there's a lot of different schools of thought here, but really, let's just get down to the basics. The main three types are product innovations, first of all. So new products or services or features. It could be a new product to a new market, complementary services. So, I think that's pretty straightforward, all the different types of products. But then there's also process. So not just the product, but how you deliver that product. So think about, of course, the channel to market, right? Is it business direct to consumer? Is it through distributors and through licensing, which is also tied to the business model, which we'll see in a minute. But it could also be internal, which folks don't often think about. It could be a different way to structure your team. It could be a different way, like you're creating agility in your processes, which is ended up creating new value for the organization. And of course, optimization, everything we already know about, being able to leverage tech. And then, like I talked about, business models. So how you make money, pure and simple, the channels you use to make money, like I say, the marketplaces or distribution. And all of these three things are tied together. And then I'd say the one that to me is even most important that crosses all of them is customer experience, because you cannot, all three of those impact and should be driven by the needs of the market and needs of the customer. So how the customer interacts with your brand, products, and services. So for an example, though, when we think about innovation, a lot of people think about that market innovation. They'll point to Uber and Airbnb, but they didn't start that way. They went through a process of innovation and of go-to-market. But when we think about market innovation, it'd be also something like, Cirque du Soleil, who, they created you could argue, a completely different market for themselves by looking at unmet needs of the consumer, and they merged theater and musicals and circus and created a whole new kind of market that didn't exist before. So that will be considered, market innovation. But what we're going to talk a lot about today is really the process of innovation for incumbent organizations, meaning organizations that are already not startups, that are already probably, like there's many of you on the call today or will listen later, that have a successful business for many years, but you need to continually innovate. To me, that's the problem I'm really interested in. That really drives me. So why does this matter? Well, we just have to look at what happened, obviously, during the pandemic to see what happens when you haven't thought about it or why it matters. Pure and simple, that you cannot possibly know everything that's going to happen, external context. And so if you're constantly thinking about the business of today without at all thinking about where the industry is going, where consumer needs are going, you might find yourself a little bit behind or not quite able to respond as quick as you can. So optimization obviously has its benefits, but focusing on innovation, and there's been a lot of studies here, and I just put three high-level stats. You can, there's a gazillion more, but it's really crucial. It's been proven, lots of data around it, to drive sustained future growth, profitability, and absolutely competitive advantage in the market. So innovative companies, and of course, is a big, framework to what means innovative. We'll talk about it in a minute. Innovative companies have higher income. What's interesting is that the revenue tends to be from new products and services or new, adjacent products and services, meaning they're never kind of resting on their laurels or continually refining it. And of course, we know that in this particular in the last 3 years that CEOs and executives consider innovation critical for growth. So what does it look like though? Well, it's like I say, constantly evolving products and services is certainly one of them. Another one is an ability to identify market opportunities, like being able to see what's perhaps not necessarily see it fully in the future, but be able to meet the needs before the customers even know they have it. And we'll talk about how you do that. Always be close to your customers. Um, so like I say, being almost like customer obsessed, being able to really focus on those needs is a surefire way to not necessarily to achieve innovation, but to have to start thinking about it. It's definitely a starting point. So let's talk about, so that was kind of the foundation of innovation. I know I'm going fast, but it's like how I like to do it. So the next, what I want to talk about is just culture. That's one of the key building blocks, which will then bring us to behaviors, which will then bring us to like this real structure of innovation. So what's interesting about culture, it's not just what we see within an organization, it's really what a group believes, which is really interesting. So, and not only at the individual level, but again, across the organization. So when we're working with a lot of customers and we work with all different size of customers. We work with a lot of associations, sports, B2B, and also mid-market retailers, helping them with technology enablement and change. But one thing I've always been super fascinated with is why some organizations seem to have a culture of resistance. And so thinking, defending the status quo, not just, they promote the status quo or they optimize existing business a little bit further than that, where they really have this defending of how things are done today. And then why others are not afraid to make small bets and not afraid to fail. So I just ask myself this a lot, and why some play to win and others just play not to lose. So a lot of different, it's just a different nuance there. Playing not to lose is a lot different than playing to win. It's a bit of a defensive game. So here's what I've heard. And yeah, I'm going to be geeking out a little bit on my Star Wars slides. Here's the things that, myself, my team members have heard on the front lines, and let me know if this is something that you hear across your organization as well. Sometimes, things like, when we're starting to work with them, well, we've tried that. It won't work. We seem to always be fighting a fire. There's just always something else to take care of. There's no time to look ahead. Yeah, we have brainstorms, but they never go anywhere. So-and-so will never go for that. Or we've just always done it this way. For 20 years, we've done it this way. I'm sure you could give me a dozen more. So this is a symptom, and it's definitely not the root cause, but a symptom of that culture of resistance. So what does that look like? What are the three, if I had to kind of, summarize into three big symptoms? And again, not the root cause. We'll talk about that in the behavior, but the biggest symptoms that I see that are really hurting a lot of organizations is that there are great ideas. By default, humans are creative. It's just that sometimes we don't allow that creativity, or we're creative in different ways. There are ideas, they're great ideas, but they never seem to get off the ground. The motivation is lost. Two, by far, is probably the biggest one. Day-to-day operations always take over. So there might be, in the strategic planning process, an idea that kind of, or a strategic pathway that is uncovered, but urgencies and today's revenue just, win every time. And so short-term gains, what that means is, we need to make revenue now, and short-term gains consistently prioritize over harder challenges. And look, I am a business owner. I get it. I'm obsessed, just like the other, on revenue generation. That's why we do it. We need to be sustainable to continue doing what we love. The problem, however, is if it's rooted in a certain amount of success, eventually, if you're continually just focused as an organization on those short-term gains, prioritizing harder challenges, it'll definitely it will definitely inhibit that long-term competitiveness. So what we're really talking about here, is a growth mindset. And again, this could be a webinar on its own. If you're interested, I'm sure you've heard about it, fixed mindset versus growth mindset. So, and you're probably thinking, well, Isabelle, I can't control the mindset of everyone on my team. Fair enough. Definitely not. But there's definitely research there that shows that you can create, as a leader, create the conditions. So, what does that look like? It looks like in an organization, that fixed mindset is really fear. It is fear-based, pure and simple. It's fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of looking stupid, fear of losing my job. Just that idea that it's not really a safe space to bring new ideas or challenge the ideas of the leadership team, even more importantly. And then a growth mindset, in contrast, really sees the possibilities. It's okay to make mistakes because the mistakes are within guardrails. So that's really important. One thing that really is a pet peeve of mine is a lot of that lingo around, fail fast, fail forward. And it really, I think we really need to put the structure around that to make sure that we understand, well, when we say that, there's a structure around it. There's a reason why we can take a certain amount of risks because we've created the structure, which I'll talk about in a minute. So as a leader, that's what I would like to talk about today too. How can you create those conditions for continual learning? So one of the things that in parallel to startups, in parallel to innovation, we often talk about startups. One is that, the lean playbook. And because we attribute, I think, negatively, well, not negatively so, but wrongfully so, we attribute innovation just to startups. And why does that happen? Well, obviously, because startups are constantly looking for opportunities by default of their nature. They're small, they're nimble. They don't have rules defined yet. When you first start business, you just kind of go. And there isn't all these departments with all these roles. Everyone is kind of hands-on. So execution is fast. There's not a lot of bureaucracy. But on the other hand, there's a lot of chaos. So if there's any startups on the call today or listening after, this is true. I work with a lot of startups and have advised a lot of startups over the year, and there's definitely some chaos. But, it's manageable chaos because it's smaller and the size of it makes it lower risk. So, but at the same time, they're just, it's ingrained in their culture to be always kind of looking for that opportunity. So, if you stop for a minute, and I'll demonstrate this quickly. So if you look around the room that you're in right now, so just take a minute, look around, and I'm asking you to make a mental note of all the square things in the room. So take a minute, look around where you are, make a mental note and count how many square things are in the room around you. Just 2 seconds. So I can already see like at least 10. Perfect. Okay. So then I want to know in the room you're in, how many round objects are there? Okay. Obviously, a little silly experiment there. But my point is, we see what we look for. Okay. We see what we look for. That's just a human nature. So in startups, of course, they're always looking for opportunities. But what happens as organizations mature is that they have to develop repeatable processes. That's what we all want. We want those repeatable processes. We want structure. We want to be codifying that success. But as organizations grow, what happens with that is that culture of experimentation is lost. And it's replaced by those ingrained behaviors, which just makes it harder to then change. In particular, if you're looking at, past 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and you don't have that culture set in, you see a lot of that potentially stagnation. And what also happens is you might have a couple of champions of change, but they will soon just become deflated and probably leave the organization if they feel that they can't influence the organization. So unfortunately, we see that a lot as well. So like I say, success is a double-edged sword. It's easier to stay on top of the hill rather than look for a new place to climb, right? But as entrepreneurs, we're ingrained to do that. But if you're a leader in a bigger organization, it's sometimes not as easy. So I know what you're thinking now. How do we avoid status quo thinking? So I think a common mistake we see is trying to replicate what looks like innovation. So let's say, hosting a hackathon, open innovation, ideation contest, free ideation time. We'll say, oh, well, the Google does it, we can do it too. Those activities are great, but they're just enablers. And they might work, they might have worked somewhere else, but it's because the underlying behaviors that are part of the culture is already in place, which makes those things what we call just kind of mechanisms of, or artifacts of innovation. It's kind of just the thing you see, but it's not the real root of the innovation. So what one of the keys is that we've been studying a lot differently, and I've been spending a lot of time on over the last, in particular, 5 years, is just trying to codify that. So organizational culture plus systems that reinforce the habits and behaviors we seek is the key. So we want to codify that process, and it's definitely a multidisciplinary effort, which is why I like, we'll be talking about the types of innovation and the behavior and then the structure, because it is multidisciplinary. Innovation in itself is not necessarily just a simple concept to implement, but there are definitely things we could start to do. And one of them is understand the behaviors that drive that innovation. So that is what we're going to look at before getting into the system. So let's look at the different behaviors. So really well documented. I definitely didn't invent this. There's, lots of literature around that. I have found consistently, though, that there are 5 behaviors in all of the literature, and also lots of behavioral psychology science behind this. And there's a great book too. Of course, it's Eat, Sleep, Innovate. And I'm looking, so it's on the bookshelf over there, which is, I think, to me, one of the best books on the behaviors. So we'll take a look at those 5 before getting into structure. So the first one is curiosity. So what I want you to do as I'm going through these 5 is to just take a mental note. I would write them down too, take a mental note. You can look at this after and see how well you fare on this. So we don't have time. There is a way to kind of codify it and say, how well are we doing on these behaviors and how are we supporting it? But like I say, it could be a whole separate webinar. So we're going to go through this quick, but I just, again, I just want to make you think about this. So the first one is curiosity. Curiosity takes a lot of different, can look a lot different, but let's say it really is about a culture that's always is asking, how might we do this differently? You see, I didn't say should. That's my other pet peeve. Should have a lot of judgments tied to it. We should do this when we're in meetings and we're facilitating. We also try to avoid that word, that we should be doing this, should be doing that. It means that you're not supposed to be doing what you're doing today. Instead of how might we do this? How might we do it better? And I will explain why that's important when we get into testing ideas, because it is all about validation. It's never wrong, right, yes or no. It's all about validating the ideas when it comes to innovation. So I just love this quote here that you see on the screen, because he was notorious for saying, that he felt the company needed to shift from a company of learn-it-all to a company of know-it-alls. I really like that. And he had noted that the company had become bureaucratic and resistant. So isn't that interesting? Look what, one of the most kind of innovative and successful organizations can also fall prey to that bureaucratic resistancy, because it is, once it's gotten to a certain level, it's codified that success. And so he also said that, innovation was being not only replaced by bureaucracy, but that teamwork was being replaced by internal politics. So he really wanted to create a learning organization again. And I think that is really something to strive for, is creating that learning organization. And not only not only learning. So a lot of people have professional development plans. What's really important is that a learning organization is an organization that really supports learning outside of its own industry. So critical for innovation. So not only looking, it's so easy to navel gaze, only looking at what we're doing, and then you miss something out of left field. But allowing time for cross-pollination of industries, like spending time going to a conference that has nothing to do with your industry, for example, or spending time on other projects. We've all known that there's multiple examples of how that has led to innovation and reward of the company. I could spend a whole session on this one, but we gotta keep moving. So customer obsession, by far, I think the most important. Relentless desire to understand your customer and their needs. And you just can't go wrong. When people say, where do we start with all this, Isabelle? We can, and we'll talk about the difference with optimization and looking at innovation. It's always, where do we start? There's just too much all the time. You can't ever go wrong by focusing on customer needs. And in particular, and just want to explore the jobs to be done. So, the jobs to be done is a concept that, if you've heard of it before, in design thinking, introduced by the late Clayton Christensen, who was just one of the forefathers of innovation from Harvard Business School. And it's really a framework to understand motivations. So the core idea is that we don't purchase specific products, we hire them to do a job. So based on the idea that we all have needs to be met, functional, social, emotional needs. So I talk a lot about this when I'm working with startups, and one of my favorite authors, Seth Godin, speaks of this concept as well quite a bit. There's always an underlying motivation. So when let's look at the job of a milkshake. So what's important here is, actually, I'll go back for a minute. So when Clayton Christensen was at developing this concept, he worked with a fast food chain who wanted to boost its milkshake sales. So, they did what most of us would probably do and go to market. They looked at market demographics, sales by, they look at all the transactional information, sales by flavor, socioeconomic, which fast food restaurant had the most sales, et cetera, et cetera. But they just couldn't really find any of the key trends that they could use to grow that product. So Christensen and his team decided to look at it a little bit differently. So there's that name again. I mean, that we're going to say that a lot, differently, think about things differently. So instead of focusing on the milkshake's features, they asked, what is the job of a milkshake? And I know that sounds silly, but they made some really surprising discovery. So what they, just to make a long story short, what they did is they spoke to the actual customers. Imagine you can't go wrong speaking to the actual customers. And they determined through this that, most of the milkshakes were sold in the morning, which was really surprising. They could see that in the data, but they didn't know why. And they came up with the three, after doing all the study, three big things. The core reasons were, one, it kept the consumer, so the person behind the wheel, entertained during a really long commute. So they had about an hour commute and it kept their hands busy. They had something in their hand. And they could hold it with one hand. So unlike a sandwich where it might get messy, or a muffin that might crumble, it was heavy enough and small enough they could hold it. It was thick enough that it lasted the whole hour and they could hold it in one hand. And it also filled them up all the way to lunch. So they necessarily didn't then have to eat something else. So three really kind of jobs that they discovered the milkshake was doing. And I share this because they hired the milkshake not because it was tasty, which is what what we think we would, let's iterate on. They hired it because it was a single-handed snack. that would make the commute more desirable. So the important here is that people don't buy your products, they buy what they do for you. And famously, this quote has been attributed to many different people, but folks don't buy a quarter-inch drill; they want a quarter-inch hole. They want the outcome of it. So, really important. Again, could delve on this the whole session, but behavior 3 is that customer obsession, and this, to me, the jobs to be done is something we use a lot differently, and I think is every organization should be using it. Is in terms of what are your products intended to do? What is the job to be done? All right, diversity of thought. This is also a favorite of mine. Innovation thrives when there are diverse groups, expertise, and mindsets that come together. So, which is why I love the concept of Crashup. And I love looking and researching topics across lots of different industries as well, because the siloed nature of an organization, like I say, you develop processes, which develops into departments, which creates your own P&L, maybe profit and loss, which creates your own, way of doing things. By default, a lot of organizations just develop silos, and sometimes quite big silos. And it's also, which means that if you're working in that department, you're usually in that silo for a big chunk of your time. And then there's just human nature. Again, so much of this is behavioral psychology. We gravitate to like-minded people. That is just who we are as humans, people with similar experiences, expertise, backgrounds. So as a leader, it's really important to hire, to seek people that don't think like you, and get diverse opinions. And it's one of the reasons why I love tech, because you can say, here's my issue and how would you tackle this? And you get so many different viewpoints. And then one thing I would say too, as a leader, is that expressing, you can be confident in expressing your views, but also open-minded to conflict, which is a hard one. It's a hard one as leaders, and it's a hard one, as individuals. But here's, I read something from Ray Dalio, the author of Principles, Key Principles, and also, the famous hedge fund manager. And I heard him in an interview saying, being able to gather everybody's opinion doesn't diminish my capacity to decide. And it was really just something that stuck with me, because, it is about being, so he calls it radically open-minded and transparent in order to make the best decision. But at the end of the day, being openly transparent to all viewpoints doesn't diminish your ability to decide. So what this involves, creating an environment where is it safe? No one is afraid to tell the truth. So super important. This to me is very telling. Are your employees and other colleagues, or if you're part of the not necessarily the founder, do you feel safe to talk about your viewpoints to the leadership team? So sharing an idea where no one is afraid to tell the truth. And what Ray does, which might not be the best for every organization, but it's certainly one way of doing it, is just radical transparency of data, which is really interesting. So, sharing data openly, creating radical transparency, again, might not be the best for everyone, but at least the core data to make decisions, being open to everybody. Second one is said leveraging disagreements, which I really like. Leveraging the disagreements between thoughtful people, which I think is really great. Because they contain, untapped potential. So, in a way, you want those naysayers. You want someone that's going to, not in a fixed mindset kind of way, but someone that will challenge your viewpoints, because it's about getting the best answer and not a consensus. You'll never have consensus. I think folks that try to create consensus all the time will really spin their wheels. It's about open debate for getting the best answer possible. I think that is a key thread in really innovative organizations. So once you've had a rigorous debate, you absolutely need the structure to decide how to proceed, which we'll talk about in the next section. But first, comfort with ambiguity is 4. Comfort with ambiguity. This is a big one. Comfort with not knowing. You don't need all the answers, but you certainly need a point of view. on what might be possible. And when we talk about ideation in a minute, there's just no way of knowing how it's going to turn out because you're not looking back at what you've done before. There's not necessarily a history. So you must be comfortable with the unknown, comfortable being uncomfortable. And as entrepreneurs, thankfully, we are. We tend to be really uncomfortable with being uncomfortable. But how do we do that as an organization together as we grow? So, that also means that the innovative organizations know how to document their assumptions. They know how to test them, pilot, and validate their ideas. And they celebrate what I call intelligent failures. So, when we say fail fast and not afraid to fail, and a lot of people we work with, it seems so empty. What we mean by that is really providing guardrails around what you're going to test. You're testing your assumptions. It's taking a scientific approach to it, just like, scientists do when they experiment. Like Thomas Edison said, or I think it was Edison, I didn't fail. I just found 2,000 ways not to make a light bulb. That's what we're talking about here. And I just put Patagonia because, obviously, like every successful business, they had to pivot a number of times. But one thing that I like is just real clarity on the purpose, which gave them a North Star, which we're going to talk as well. Okay, empowered is number 5. So we had, curiosity, diversity of thought, being comfortable, being uncomfortable, customer obsession, and empowerment. So what does that mean? Allowing quicker action. So as entrepreneurs and as leaders, we tend to be biased towards actions, but that doesn't mean the company is biased, towards action, towards solving those problems. So it really is, how do you enable quick actions across the enterprise? And of course, the answer is carefully, but empowerment is a crucial element in cultivating a culture of innovation because it gives people autonomy, authority, and resources. So, Google gave, 20% of time policy. Intuit provides employees with dedicated unstructured time. So that's what we mean by empowerment. So those are kind of the 5 big behaviors. And so when you look at this over again, try to pinpoint where you are on that scale and which areas you might need to improve upon. So we've got 2 other big areas. We're going fast, like I said, creativity, which I really want to address, and then move into structure. And then hopefully we'll have 5-7 minutes for questions. So let's talk about creativity, because I think many organizations could not be any better at killing ideas and creativity. And they're not one and the same process. Like I said, creativity is really that process of generating ideas, but innovation is the process of taking those ideas and turn it into tangible outcomes. So why do so many, we've been in brainstorms, gang. I'm sure all of you have been in dreaded brainstorms sometimes. Why do they not lead to breakthroughs? Why does it not happen more often? Because it's really just it's one part of the creative process. And here's what I'll say. It's never just one idea. Again, so much literature on this one. This could be, again, a whole other area, which is why innovation is fascinating, because it really is all these combinations. It's never just one idea. It's the combination of seemingly disparate ideas. And it's also the incubation process that is so important. So it's kind of like, during putting all the ingredients in a pot, for lunch, but just because all the ingredients are in there doesn't mean that it's going to be, the meal is ready. So when you're having a brainstorm, what people are giving you is just top of mind ideas. But the key is that they also might be giving you groupthink, meaning, it's just the safest place to be. A lot of people don't want disharmony, or, the highest opinion in the room, highest paid opinion in the room wins, for example. So what is shown is that ideas need the opportunity to be connected with other ideas. And it also requires an incubation process where your subconscious is working. So we've all had that aha moment in the shower, when we're running, when we're working out, or, for me, kind of the last 10 years culminating in like, oh, yes, something we've developed called innovation as a service, It really is this, it's not quick. It's a culmination of a lot of discussions and seeing what's in the marketplace. And that's what you need to realize as well in your organization, is that the ideas, just because there is one brainstorm, will not make it a breakthrough. Okay, this is arguably probably the most pragmatic section here, and where what you might be able to do right away is really this balancing of optimizing and exploring. So, and it's, sometimes we call it innovation portfolio, but that's, it sounds kind of big and heavy. It really just is strategic planning. Somebody's like, well, isn't this just strategic planning? Yeah, it is. But here's what I'm finding, though, that a lot of folks don't do the exploration part in strategic planning. If you're doing the strategic planning well, it should be like using the playing to win model, for example. But most folks, I would say most, but I'd say at least half organizations that I tend to, when I encounter, they look at what's been done in the past, and then they iterate on that, which is really just optimization. So the challenge there is that it's just not enough to propel that growth over time if you're simply focused on the efficiency and the optimization of your current business. And it's not the same. And people say, well, okay, if you're exploring the opportunities, well, that's just long-term planning. And I say, well, no, it's not. You can do long-term planning on your existing business. Exploring new opportunities is something a little bit different. It's a bit of a balance. So what we see is an 80-20 focus. There is no right way here. There is no right. I really don't believe there's a one size fits all for innovation. You have to find one that's like tailored suit, just, like fits your body, that fits your culture. But I would say if it's not at least 20%, or I'd say at least 10%, I think you're in trouble. So what we're looking at here is areas to optimize the business. So obviously, if there's a burning fire, in the business, this is where 80% of the focus is going to be. Even if there's no burning fire, it is where 80% should be, because like I say, you've codified that success. Let's keep doing it. So it's doing what you're doing, but better. It could be optimizing tech. It could be looking at your processes, looking at, increasing your margins, et cetera. But it's not the same as explore. So here's what I see a lot of organizations doing, however, is that they think it's one big bet when it comes to innovation, as opposed to what we'll look at when we look at exploration. It's doing many small bets, looking at many different areas that you can start exploring into, and doing some small scale testing until you find what works. So where to start is really aligning to the purpose. That's always the first key thing. What are you in business for? What is your vision? What is the purpose? And that absolutely will change, but it should be the North Star for both of those exercises. And then looking at what trends have staying power, how your industry is changing, how it might change, how can you leverage existing capabilities to spur that growth? So all of the areas that you can change. So how do you experiment? How do you practically do that? Following these 4 steps, just like Darth Vader says here. Okay, this is one to just take a quick snapshot, remember it. Obviously, again, a lot of meat behind this, but if I had to, to just break it down, and this is not new, this is not necessarily mine, this has been around forever, but it's not something that is structured within an organization. Often you don't quite see organizations that have been around for a long time being able to replicate this. So validating the problem, is it a real problem? Is it a true job to be done? Are we focusing on the actual problem? You need to document your assumptions, and you can only do that by talking to a lot of customers to find. And you're not going to find the one, you're going to find many of them. Validate the solution, then so different ways to tackle a problem. Fall in love with the problem, not the solution, right? Don't get too enamored with one way and then do a big business plan. You're looking to test quickly and often. And then you're validating the potential. You're looking for solid evidence that this could actually work, that this is the right approach, that clients are going to pay for this. Do we have to sign up subscriptions? And you're gathering more evidence along the way. Gather. And as you're doing this, 3/4 of those ideas will go to the wayside because you're not able to get to the next stage. And then, of course, we validate the business model. So testing the value proposition with a small market, the smallest viable market. Can we do this profitably and collect evidence that you could scale it? So that 4-step validation process is really how you get to, again, you've done the ideation needs time to breathe, but you need a structure to then take those ideas to the next level. So it's not about finding the big idea, the one unicorn, and it's definitely not all data-driven at this point. There is no way that there is data on anything new because you haven't done it. You can look at data outside your organization, but what you're trying to do here is avoid doing a big business plan for something that you're trying to test quickly, which is another area I see organizations struggle with. And then also having the right skill set. This is one where you can't really get around. So I do firmly believe that those that are kind of running the business of today, it's really difficult for them to also look at innovation unless you're a really, startup or a small organization. It's just a different skill set, but it's also a different structure. You're not building a business plan. So tackling some of those barriers. So I'm looking at the time, and I know I went super, super fast. And some of the examples that I wanted to give a lot of different examples, just not a heck of a lot of time, but things like, Play-Doh, for example, that over time, that re-engineered, that looked at their product. It was like a paint, it was a wallpaper cleaner, for God's sakes. And then there was the sister-in-law of the nephew's founder said, "Hey, I need something for my kids, for my kids to play with." And they, in her kindergarten class, and they found this new application for the cleaner, which became Play-Doh. But it just goes to show really quickly that there was a founder that was curious. There was someone that was curious and said, "What? Hey, I wonder if this could work." And then the founder, who was empowered, saying, "Yeah, let's try it." Not afraid, completely, obviously unknown, comfort with ambiguity, and of course, the rest is history. Same thing with Slack, which started as it started as an internal communications tool for a game. It was called Glitch. And long story short, that even after, lots of rounds of funding, wasn't successful, but they decided, I think there's something in this communications tool we have that's helping us communicate with, across all of our businesses. It started in 2019 to 2009. And then in 2013, they pivoted to Slack. And I'm giving it that example because we talk about pivots a lot in startups. They're able to pivot. But what's important to understand is that it was really past the startup phase, this company, right? We just happened to see it at the tipping point. So this idea of pivoting and being able to look at unmet opportunities is something that every organization can cultivate, which then leads to that innovation. So what we talked about today is all the types of innovation and the outcomes, the culture, the behavior, disruptive thinking and creativity, efficiency versus innovation, and then the testing of ideas. So super, super quick review of kind of the overall structure that you need to think about. And again, you'll need to look at this again, I'm sure. But if I had to dwindle it down into 5 super key steps as a proven process to increase your innovation capacity, it's being clear on vision and purpose, then optimize versus explore, being really clear on where you're going to optimize versus explore. And yes, this is strategic planning, but if you do it right, looking at not just optimizing today's business, but also picking a couple of areas where against your North Star, against the job to be done and customer needs, and then doing many little bets that are within a testing structure, experiment and validate, then choose, that's what you can choose on the evidence and then scale. And most importantly, absolutely build the right conditions for innovations to exist. And finally, if you're thinking, why does rational, the title of it, rational, is overrated because, rational is not always better. And this through, my own incubation process of the last 10 years, it's really, moving beyond linear thinking was kind of my aha moment. Saying rational decisions is really excellent for today's business, where you're looking for the most efficient and effective solution. Often through obviously like cost benefit analysis, business planning. But reasonable is a better view for tomorrow, because reasonable refers to decision making in context, decision making that is sensible, but looking at environment that is sometimes unpredictable, adaptable, and open to change. So, which is why, to me, you need rational decision making when it's stable and predictable environments, but you aim to be reasonable under complexity and uncertainty, which is really how we're operating our businesses. It is the pace of change is forever increasing. So essentially why, by my theory of rational is certainly overrated, and aim for reasonable. Colton and the folks are going to be like, oh my God, I left like 2 minutes. I was expecting you to go, Isabelle, that's enough.
You know what? The trade-off of the information that you gave and the space at the end for questions, I think is definitely worthwhile. So much great information packed into those slides. We even had a lot of comments coming through saying that it was a fantastic presentation. So really appreciate that. We're going to throw 1, maybe 2 questions your way, depending on how long they take, and then we'll close out here. So if you could kind of distill it, what would you say is the most common pitfall you see that companies face when trying to identify significant problems and opportunities? So I know it's kind of a broad question, but what could you say is the one most common pitfall?
When trying to identify opportunity, I'd say it's what I mentioned quickly, is that they're looking at what they did yesterday instead of what's possible for tomorrow, which is, I think, quite natural. But they're stuck in that optimization phase. So they'll look at, and the problem there is that they'll just take yesterday's plans, right? They get into this system of like, all the executives are looking at the plans they did last year. They take it and so by default, it just creates kind of sometimes status quo thinking, where you're just looking to optimize what you did, as opposed to saying, wait a minute, strategy is about choices. What are we going to stop doing as well, based on what we're seeing in the marketplace? I think that's the biggest pitfall.
Excellent. Great. Thank you for that insight. And one more just to close out here. So how do you yourself ensure that you're, kind of constantly and continuously improving, you're keeping up with the rapidly changing market trends? I mean, you have so much great information, but I'm sure, the landscape shifts so often. How do you kind of stay on top of it all?
I felt so fantastic question. I read a ton. I read probably too much. I read outside of my industry. So I read a lot of different books, psychology, economy. I talk to different people. This is why I said tech is great. I ask for information on how somebody totally outside of my industry would solve a certain problem. I think diversity of thought is, to keep a learning mindset, is absolutely critical as leaders.
100%. Well, thanks so much for sharing that. It's good to get a glimpse into the life of Isabelle and how you...
I don't know, wasn't too scary.
Love it. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Isabelle. We really do appreciate all of your valuable insights today on moving beyond sort of that linear thinking and the impact that it has on innovation. And of course, thank you to everyone who tuned in live for this Tech Canada Deeper Insights webinar. If you missed it, or if you'd like to go back and rewatch the great information shared by Isabelle, you can find a recording of this webinar at Tech Canada's website, tec-canada.com, or on our YouTube channel. So with that, we here at Tech Canada wish everyone a great rest of the day. And once again, Isabelle, thank you so much. A really fantastic presentation.
My pleasure.